And my next guest is Marie Claire Ross. And Marie Claire is going to be talking about how to create a thriving team culture. And she'll be on in about 4 minutes' time. Welcome, Marie Claire. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's an absolute pleasure to see you again.
Thank you, Rose, and thank you so much for doing this. It's such a wonderful conference that you've put together.
Marie Claire she's a speaker, she's a facilitator, and she's a mentor. She works with leaders and teams to build trust, thriving team cultures that increase engagement, team credibility, and helps to create great talent. She is also the author of Trusted to Thrive: How Leaders Create Connected and Accountable Teams and Transforms Your Safety Communication. Marie Claire is on the Small to Medium Enterprise Committee for the Australian Institute of Company Directors and is a fellow of the CEO Institute. It's wonderful to have you here. Tell me a little bit about your gift that you are offering today, which is the Trusted Leader Assessment.
Yeah, it's a really interesting tool for leaders to actually reflect on what they're doing. And it's going to tie in nicely to the model that I'm going to unpack in the presentation today. What I've found, I do a lot of research in companies, and what I've found is that really high performing leaders self-reflect on what they're doing on a regular basis. So this tool will help leaders do this.
Wonderful. So they can grab that on your website at www.marie-claireross.com, and it's /trusted_leader_assessment. And so, yeah, take advantage of that. And so I welcome you to the online summit, Marie Claire, and take it away. The floor's yours.
Yeah, cool. Thank you, Rose. And hello, everyone. It's so wonderful to be here this morning. And it's such a really good time because the world of work has changed and things aren't like they used to be. And if you don't know all the changes or you haven't quite got on board with them, you're going to be left behind. So today I am going to share with you what's been going on, what you need to know, and what you can do about it so you can ensure that you're being the leader that your people need you to be. Because running a small business, there's so many different pieces and parts that you have to manage, and being able to do the people side can often be quite challenging. And so having a system, having a way to do that can be very helpful. And that's what I want to share with you today. I've actually been running my own businesses now since 2001. And actually, I've been doing a GST every quarter since they started in the year 2000, which is really kind of sad, even though I have bookkeepers and all that sort of thing. But, this is what happens when you're self-employed. There are so many things that you have to do. So I'm really excited about sharing this content with you today. And actually, let's get started. So I actually just want you to think about how many people are in your team. Do you have, and this is everyone, your bookkeeper, it could be your graphic designer, your social media person, have a think about how many people are in your team. For some of you, you might be quite small, you might only have a small handful, but for others, you might have 20, you might have 30, whatever it is, because the closer, what's really interesting when it comes to small businesses, that the smaller your team, the easier it is to really run that team really, really well. And, often when I talk to people in big companies, how they run their teams are quite impersonal. But small business owners, we're really good at really working with our people and caring about them. And we need to do that because the world of work really has changed, if you hadn't gathered. So what's been really positive from the pandemic is that COVID really made us reevaluate what we want from work. When we were in lockdown, we couldn't get out and about, and we had to work from home. It really made us understand and think about what's important to us. And what many people realized is that they don't want to work long hours in companies where they're not appreciated or valued. They don't want to work with people that aren't that nice to them. And a lot of people realized that they wanted to be working in companies where they felt appreciated and where they could actually, have that work-life balance so that they could spend time on their hobbies or their personal interests or with their families. And so we've seen this rebalancing of what work is for us, which honestly is a healthy thing. But what's really interesting is that at the heart of it, it's about putting our well-being first. It's about really doing things that are good for us and make us feel good, because otherwise the health consequences are really bad, because so many people suffered from stress and mental health. And, that's still continuing to this day for those of us who haven't got that into balance. And it's really about understanding that flexible work requires flexible thinking around work practices. Gone are the days when everyone was in an office working together 5 days a week. And back then, this is only, just over 3 years ago, you could actually tell the culture of an organization from walking into the reception. How the receptionist greeted you, how people interacted, you could really see just by looking at it. But what's happened now is the culture has actually moved from physical proximity to emotional proximity. And what I mean by that is that as a team leader, now I'm assuming that most of you do have some sort of hybrid workforce, because if you're self-employed running a small business, you usually tend to have workers overseas that are more affordable. But you're still creating that culture by your interactions with them and how you're connecting with them. And I'm going to go through how that works just a little bit later. But essentially, it all requires trust. You've got to trust that people are working for you when you can't see them working. And I'm going to admit, as a small business owner, that was one of the hardest things for both my husband and I, because I did start over 20 years ago running a business with my husband, and we really struggled with that. And, we really had to work on it to really believe that our people were trusting on them. We were trusting them, and we weren't, checking in on them needlessly all the time and making them feel uncomfortable. But at the center of any successful team is trust. It really is the beating heart. And what's so good about trust is that for you, as a leader who is trusted and who trusts their people, you'll find many benefits. And by that I mean is that people will want to work with you and your team. This is the beautiful thing. For those of you who have trouble keeping staff or hiring staff, if you have a really warm, caring, nurturing environment, people don't want to leave you, because they know that it's such a good feeling to work with you. And the other thing is things get done. What's really lovely is when you have a team that trusts one another, people aren't doing all those silly people behaviors that stop work from happening. There's no unnecessary people issues. But the good thing is that you feel happy in your job. Often when I coach leaders or I work with leadership teams in, small and medium-sized businesses, it gets to a stage where even the CEO or the owner of the business says, oh my gosh, I don't want to get up and go to work anymore. It's just too hard. The people problems are just taking over. But when that's happening, that trust is an issue and something that you need to work on. But the good thing is that when you have trust in your team, you get better opportunities. And by better opportunities, I mean you get better opportunities to tender for great projects. Companies will come back and want you to work on things, more things, and they'll give you more and more work. So it's this really great, almost like snowball effect that you see. Now, when we talk about trust, we want to define it, because it does mean different things to different people. And so the best definition that I've come up with so far is that it's the ability for everyone in an organization to confidently rely on and predict that others will do the right thing and make good on their promises. Now, in a low risk situation, trust isn't an issue. things happen. Everything's good. No one's pulling back or, sabotaging things. But once you move into high risk, once you have a lot of change, there's a lot of fear going on because people don't know what's happening, then you'll find people start to pull back. And that's what we've got to be aware of as a leader. And that's what we've got to minimize as much as we can. But when we get this right, the research shows us that the benefits are so amazing. So this study came out from ADPRI. And what they found was they surveyed 50,000 participants or employees, and they were asked if they trusted their teammates, their team leader, or their senior leaders. And they found that those who trusted in 3 of those categories were 3 times as likely to be fully engaged and resilient than others. That's pretty good. We're not going to fault that. But what's really amazing is those who trusted in all 3 categories, the results were just outstanding. They were 15 times more likely to be fully engaged. They were 42 times more likely to be highly resilient. And so as a small business owner, oh my gosh, you are the teammate, the team leader, and the senior leader. You control all of those. It's so much easier for you to be able to manage that trust in your team. You don't have 300 people that you're trying to manage. You are naturally building close relationships with everyone. And then this study came out through Deloitte just last year. Now, they found that 1 in 4 workers don't trust their employer. So that's 25%. And honestly, that's pretty good. I would have thought it was higher, but 25%, yeah, that's okay. But the issue, the problem, is that 40% is by how much employers overestimate their workforce's trust level. And this reminds me of, I was at this lunch one day a couple of years ago before COVID, and I met this guy. I think I was sitting beside him, and he had his own small business. And he asked me what I did, and I said, I teach leaders and teams how to build trust. And he goes, oh my gosh, why would anyone need to know that? And I tried not to laugh or get upset. And he said, so trust is how you do business. It's just how you are. And he goes, my people trust me. And I said, how do you know that? And he goes, well, whenever I put up a message and ask for people to do an extra shift, they all clamour for it. Everyone wants to work with me. They just want to take all the extra shifts. If they didn't trust me, they wouldn't want to work with me. And I felt really sorry for him in that moment because he didn't quite understand that working for him and trusting him were a little bit different. Maybe people just wanted the shifts because they needed the money, not so much because they trusted him as a boss. But I let him be because I knew that I wasn't going to, change his mind on anything. But essentially, when you have trusting employees, they are 260%, and I'll say that again, 260% more motivated to work. They have 41% lower rates of absenteeism. And, let's face it, when you're running a small business, you don't want people taking sickies all the time. So that's a good number too. And they're 50% less likely to look for another job. Now, of course, as a small business owner, what's one of your biggest issues? It's retaining great talent. So to be able to keep people for longer is wonderful. And this is what focusing on trust in your teams helps you do. Not only that, it improves the credibility of your team. If you're doing good work, if you're working really well together and you're creating work or products or services for your clients that are on time, to the right quality and at standard, then you'll find that the work will increase. I've been coaching a mid-sized company, and I've been actually working with a team that, the quality's dropped off. The leaders have felt really bad about what's going on. There's been lots of absenteeism, lots of turn. It's been really hard for them. And we've slowly turned it around to the point now where they're getting customers going, oh my gosh, the quality of your work is so much better. We can see the difference. And in 1 week, they had 3 customers come back and say, hey, this is really good. And they're just starting to see this uptick in sales. But it's not just the quality that's better, even the staff are happier. And as the leaders tell me, it's just so much nicer going to work. There's this, almost like this release, this relief of stress that's gone, and people are just working better together. And of course, when that happens, what you'll find is that people will speak openly about issues. So people will tackle problems together. Now, for you as a leader, this is one of the most important things that you've got to ensure keeps happening the more you grow your business. Because as things get bigger and as you get busier and you're not connected to your staff so much, people will be a little bit reticent to share things with you. And this is where problems can happen, because you get blindsided by problems that you didn't know were happening because no one told you. And of course, when you have trust, it really does unblock performance. So it increases the speed of decisions and in the team, which are really important for the functioning of the team. Because if you don't have that, you'll find that it's like walking through mud. It's just sludgy. And you'll need lots of meetings to make decisions. People will double up on resources, they block each other, and they request more information. Now, depending on the size of your business, that probably isn't so much of an issue now. But as you grow, as you get bigger, these are the signs that really show you that something's a bit amiss. And it's when the people problems start to make more productivity problems. In big organizations that I work with, this is so common. This happens all the time. It's, what humans fall into when things start to change. Now, I did a little survey with my list, and I'm actually an ex-market researcher. So I can tell you that even though I've only got a small number of 34 people, it is statistically significant. Now, the only problem is they are my list, so that's a little bit of a flaw. But it's just to give you a flavour of the pressing problems with leaders leading their team right now, because I polled people just a couple of months ago. And because there's no research on this at the moment. So I just wanted to see what people were saying. And it was multiple choice, and people said things like 15% said getting work done on time. Another 15% said protecting team from overload. Another 14% said getting work done to standard. 12% keeping people engaged, and 10% helping people stay focused. And what's interesting is because of the cost of living pressures, the financial burden on people is impacting their work. So that's becoming more of an issue. And I haven't seen any research in Australia on that yet, but it's coming through in other countries. So it's something to keep in mind. But I want you just to think about, what issues are you seeing in your teams? Are they the same issues? Is it protecting people from overload, or, in big companies, they have to protect their team from toxic leaders. But, in more small businesses, it's more usually something to do with accountability. So getting work done on time, getting work done to standard, getting work done to the right amount of quality, are the typical issues which you might be seeing. Okay, so I want to go back 50,000, 100,000 years ago when humans roamed the African savannah. Now, back then, life was pretty tough. You think you've got it tough now, but life back then, let me assure you, was pretty bad. Because back then, you didn't know if you were going to get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger or bitten by a snake. And we had to trust as human beings that people would look out for us, and we had to trust, and they had to trust that we would look out for them. And so as human beings, we are actually designed to want to be with other people. It's how we're kept safe. We need other people to protect us, because let's face it, if we're not with other people, we're lunch for those saber-toothed tigers. And so as human beings, our brains are always scanning the environment to make sure that we're safe. And when we don't feel safe in our teams or in our workplace, what happens is we go into flight, fright, or freeze mode. And you can see this with your employees. They don't know what to do, they get stuck, they work on the wrong things, They get all worried about something they didn't need to worry about. And so as a leader, you want to know that when you see that happening in your team, that they're not working in an effective part of the brain. In fact, you might be doing that yourself. If you're feeling stuck or frozen or you don't know what to do, you're actually working from the mammalian or limbic system. Now, this is our old original brain. It's our survival brain. And it was actually, it's been with us since the African savannah days, and it's basically there to keep us safe and to help us survive. It's where we store our patterns, our habits, and routines. And it's where we, when we wake up in the morning, we don't have to think about what to do or how to use a knife and fork or how to walk, because it's all stored in that part of the brain so that we are able to do other things. Now, what's really interesting about this part of the brain is that it's where we store our emotions. It's responsible for feelings, for processing feelings such as trust and loyalty. But the real kicker is it has no capacity for language. So when we trust someone, it's not based on what they say, it's based on how they make us feel. And you can't actually talk your way into trust. You have to behave your way into it. I'll say that again. You can't talk your way into trust. You have to behave your way into it. Now, what's interesting about this is that employees, when they do an employee engagement survey, one of the biggest complaints is that leaders aren't walking the talk. They're not matching their words to their actions. The lyrics aren't matching the music. And as human beings, we instinctively check to see if people are doing what they say they're going to do. It's how we check out whether we can trust them, because that's working with this limbic system. We need to see a match there. And what people need from us is that we're reliable and predictable. That sounds really easy, doesn't it? But oh my gosh, it is really hard. When I do work with leaders, when I work in companies and I do research, what I find all the time is that leaders are inconsistently consistent. Let me give you an example. I was working with a school, and the leaders did this amazing thing. They would actually stand by the gate every morning. They would rotate it in the senior leadership team. So the principal and the vice principals, there were 5 of them, 2 of them would be at the gate every morning. And they would greet everyone, every student, every parent. It was, it's one of the best things school leaders can do, because it makes every child feel welcome, makes every parent feel happy as well. Brilliant thing to do. But when I did research in this school and I talked to teachers, I talked to parents, I talked to admin staff, the missing link I found was that teachers were not being greeted. Yes, teachers weren't being greeted. Everyone was so busy looking after the parents and the students, which is the right thing to do, by the way, but they were forgetting to actually welcome the teachers and help them, because we all know that teachers are absolutely overburdened with ridiculous workloads. It's a chronic problem in this country. And they weren't feeling valued because, they'd walk down the hall, they might see a vice principal, they might see a principal, and there was not always a hello. But not only that, they weren't even coming into the tea room to hang out with them, which is what they really needed. So they were being inconsistently consistent. So the thing is, when we're fearful, when we don't feel like we're part of something and people are excluding us, we go into this unresourceful part of the brain, and it's where we make fear-based decisions. And it's where we actually make decisions that are really narrow. It's from this perspective here rather than the broader perspective of what's available to us. It's a really negative perspective to be in, really terrible place to be in as a business owner, because you have to be upbeat and positive most of the time. But what we really want to do is and the prefrontal cortex is this part of the brain here. And this is our newer part of the brain. This is where we can plan, this is where we can innovate. It's where we work out the amazing vision and the steps to get there. This is where we rally our people and ourselves to think about this beautiful future where the effort, all the work that we're doing is worth it. And so this part of the brain is actually one where we respond from choice, like this big expanse of, where we are and what's available to us, rather than that really narrow, fearful perspective. And so to get there, we actually want to move ourselves, because this is for us as well, and our teams into what I call the achievement zone. Now, the achievement zone is really about helping our teams by communicating not just verbally with words, but also non-verbally. And this is a tricky thing. We often don't realize that even our verbal expressions need to match what we say. Many years ago, I used to direct CEOs on camera. I have had a video production company, and I would direct CEOs and directors. And I had this one CEO, and when he would talk about this new amazing product that his company was launching, he would do this as he was talking. And I said, do you realize you're shaking your head no as you talk about that product? Is there something about it you don't like? And he was all quiet. And then he said, yeah, I don't believe in it. Head office is making us do this, which was in Denmark, I think. I don't think it's good. I don't like it. And I said, well, what is it about it that you need to focus on to make you feel good about it? Because your body language is telling everyone it's no good. And people pick that up. We think they don't, but they do. So it's really important that we do match our non-verbals with what we're saying, because our employees are picking it up. Now, sometimes we have non-verbals that are working against us and we don't even know it. So, for example, I have a grumpy face when I'm thinking. When I'm thinking, processing information, when I'm working, I look freaking grumpy. I tell you that. And I think I'm smiling, but then my husband, for example, or my kids were saying, you're not smiling. A little bit tricky when someone's taking a photo of me, because I'm at that age, lots of wrinkles now, so I try not to smile too much because the wrinkles. But and then people will say, you're not smiling, and I go, yeah, I am. So that's a tad bad. So we just want to be aware of our verbal, non-verbal expressions, because sometimes we don't realize that people are going, oh, they're grumpy, they're upset with me. And some people, particularly sensitive people, people who, particularly young people who don't quite understand, the world of work yet, they go into fear, and we want to reduce that as much as possible. So what I want to impress on you is that it's really about working with the brain that doesn't understand language so much, but understands feelings, because it's those feelings that people are going to be interpreting, whether they're right or wrong. Those feelings that they get from their communication with us is going to drive their behavior. So let's unpack this, because I want to go through 3 pillars for you to actually work on. And the first one is fostering safety. Now, fostering safety, I see safety in 2 ways. There's physical safety, so people are physically safe at work. They're not going to get hurt, they're not going to die. Really important for people's brains to feel safe. And of course, psychological safety. Now, psychological safety is a term that you've probably heard, very popular. It actually means you can take risks, be yourself, and you're not going to get thrown out of the team. And we need that, really important for us to perform at a higher level. Now, what psychological safety does is it enables candor. So people will talk about those things before they become a problem. They'll let you know about stuff that you need to know about rather than hiding it, because they're scared you're going to tell them off. Now, the tricky thing with psychological safety, and as small business owners, we tend to think, it's all about this nice, warm environment. We look after everyone. We don't tell them off. We don't pull them up if they come to work late. We ignore when they do terrible work. It's not that at all. So to have high standards, you need psychological safety and high standards. They come together. They're inextricably linked. Because if you have a safe environment, but you're not if you're letting accountability slip, you're just creating a workforce that's lazy, delegates everything back to you, and it makes life really, really hard. And you'll end up not wanting to get up in the morning and go to work. But what you want to do is really hold people to a high standard. You're challenging people. People love leaders that challenge them to be bigger and better than what they could be on their own. You're like a coach. But it's understanding that there's this interpersonal risk that's going on and that people are fearful about being with other people. And so, this is what stops us from sharing and contributing. If you've got younger employees, they're really bad about speaking up on stuff because they're scared. I mean, you think about when you started your career, it's quite scary talking to adults about stuff. And of course, why this is so important is that Dr. Amy Edmondson, who wrote the book The Fearless Organization, she coined the term psychological safety in the workplace, and that's what she's famous about. She says that one of the most important capabilities of a leader is to create a safe environment that reduces interpersonal risk. And so this is important to get your head around because it's creating that space for the brain to feel safe. When you're with a group of people and they like you and you feel valued and appreciated, you kind of relax into it because you know that you're with people that care about you, and that's just such a lovely place to be. And so, you'd know that you have safety if you've created it in your team, is that people feel obligated to tell you about stuff. So people will say, hey, I'm worried about this problem, or a customer has said this, or this delivery is going to be late, or I stuffed up, I didn't get this done on time. This is really important, and it's really hard for us to sometimes understand this. I know I struggle with this. It's not telling people off when they make a big mistake. So I was doing some coaching with a leadership team, and one of the executives said to me, actually, I was doing interviews, and he said to me that he knew that the principal he was safe around, because when he made this mistake in the first week of working at this company, she didn't tell him off. Instead, she used that opportunity as a learning opportunity and said, what have you learnt from this? And that was really important for him. And that's so true. Learning, when we learn together, it's safe. So it's something that you've got to focus on. Now, the second thing is creating connection. Now, creating connection there are two parts to this. It's about connecting people together, having that sense of belonging in your team. So connecting people to you, connecting people in your team to one another. But the second thing is a little bit more broader. And this is about being a leader who really helps to connect the dots for people. So in any sort of business, there are lots of different pieces and parts that need to fit together. You want to explain that big jigsaw puzzle and how all those pieces fit together, and all those pieces that represent different people, how you all work together, create value, understand each other, really, really important. And this really involves actually working with people one-on-one to actually align their self-interest to the business purpose. Now, this is going to scare you as a small business owner because you're probably thinking, oh my gosh, I haven't got lots of job opportunities or learning opportunities. I don't have the money. We're very small. I've only got this, little area that I work in. But one of the things that I used to do is sit down with my people and just find out their career goals and their personal aspirations and really tie in where the business is going and what was going to help them. And that worked really well. And it was surprising, even as a small business, I was able to find some opportunities for them to be able to tap into. And that was really positive for them and me. But why it's so important is that it creates meaningfulness. And meaningfulness has been found to be so good for our well-being. So there was a study done by the Energy Project, and they found that employees who derive meaning from their work are 3 times more likely to stay at their organization, 1.7 times more satisfied in their jobs, and 1.4 times more engaged in their work. And so meaningfulness is usually an underutilized leadership tool But when you really help people understand the meaning of their work, why the work is important for you, how it's helping you, how it's helping customers, how it's helping them in their careers, it really does improve productivity, engagement, and performance. And it's really about going from being task focused to meaning focused. So that's not only just good for you, your people, it's also good for you as well. Okay, so the final one is stepping into a meaningful future. Now, a couple of years ago, back in 2020, my father-in-law, who was a dairy farmer, he was actually on his deathbed in a hospital in Warrnambool. And this was during COVID lockdown. So only his wife, Margaret, and his daughter, Coral, could be there. And Graham, he was such a hard worker, always worked on his farm his whole life. And so he had retired for 10 years, but dementia had set in. And only a couple of months before he was on his deathbed, he'd actually written a cute little note to his wife, Margaret, with some of the tasks that his workers needed to do at the dairy. Of course, he didn't have any workers at that stage. He'd long since retired. But this was so important to him, his work and being a dairy farmer. Now, Graham was one of those people, because he worked so hard, he basically would injure himself or would make himself so sick every 18 months, every 2 years, to get himself into hospital and to take some time off work, which I hope none of you do. Not a good thing to do. And this had been happening for many years. So when he was in hospital and he had dementia and had this hip injury, we thought, oh, he's probably going to make it, because he always seemed to. But on this cold night in August, he actually was lying in bed and he was all dozy and in and out of consciousness from the morphine. And he woke up in a startled way, and he said to Margaret, in a really lucid, coherent way, which he hadn't for some time, and he said to her, I can't see my future. I can't see my future. And Margaret and Coral had heard him say this before. He'd said this in hospital only 3 years before. And back then they could say, well, this is happening, you're doing this, doing that. But, this time it was different. His body was completely physically, almost destroyed from the hip surgery that he was recovering from. His brain wasn't there. And Margaret just said to him lovingly, it's okay, Graham. You don't need to know your future. And it was almost like he could relax, and he finally gave himself permission to let go. And it was actually half an hour later, after she and Coral had left, that he was able to move on out of this physical world. And this is what's important for us to realize, is that we really need to trust that there is a future, and we need to be able to envision that we have one. And it's not just good for us as small business owners, but our people as well really need to feel that there is a future in the business, that there is work for them, that we are making the right decisions. And they want to know that we believe as business owners that our future is brighter than our past, and we have a plan to get there, which is probably the most important thing. People want to know what your plan is and how they're going to fit into it and what career opportunities for them. That's what people are thinking about. When I work in small businesses that have lots of issues with people not doing the right thing and fighting and all that sort of stuff, 9 times out of 10, it's because the CEO hasn't defined a really clear vision. So it's about creating a perception of certainty. We can't actually say, hey, here's the strategy, this is what we're going to do, everything's going to work out, because things don't work like that anymore. But it's by helping people realize that you have a plan. And the best way to do it, because the brain understands abstract information more easily than comparison, you want to explain, well, this is where we are now, these are the issues, this is the gap, and this is where we need to be. So it's a bit like actually being in a shopping center and you go to the map generator and it says you are here, you plug in where you want to go, and it gives you that little drawing, that little animation of where you need to be. And that's kind of what you need to do to explain it to your people. And so if we were to actually think about these 3 things, so we've got safety here and we've got connection. Now, can you understand that these connect? You're not going to feel connected to people if you don't feel safe with them? And then at the same time, underneath that, supporting them is future. You know, we need to feel that we're safe, connected, and there's some future, that we are working towards something that's exciting and the effort will be worth it. And then in the intersection between connection and safety, we have meetings and face-to-face time or one-on-ones with our people to help connect people together and make them feel safe. And then between the intersection between connection and future, we have visibility. People really need to see that things are transparent, that, you know, the goals, that they need to see you, they need to feel like nothing's being hidden from them. And then when we have future and safety, the natural thing in between that's accountability, because, you know, you can't have safety without accountability. You've got to have both for high performance. Now they all, oh, sorry, I keep hitting the microphone. So they all link to catalyze, to create trust, which is the beating heart of your team. And so you can kind of get, you know, if we were to draw that out, this is what it actually looks like in my mind. And you can see the questions that our brain is asking all the time. Is it safe to be myself? Do I belong here? Can I trust these people to look out for me? And what's my future with these people? And so you can almost think of these practices as like being ropes that help your employees feel connected to you. It's a bit like the tethers that keep astronauts tied to the spaceship so they don't fly away in space. Because in space, astronauts have to leave the safety of the spaceship to do a spacewalk. And every leader is like a spacecraft that supports their direct reports to explore, learn new things, and work at their highest level. And it really does provide people with the security and safety that they need to feel connected and protected by both their leader and their crew. Okay, so when employees see evidence of consistent action and behaviour that indicates good intent, trust thrives. And in the book Trusted to Thrive, I do unpack this model and give you lots of tips and tricks to actually help you. And it's really about, you know, thinking about how do you create that safety? How do you create that connection? You know, I do believe that leadership is a gift, because, you know, one of the beautiful things of being a small business owner, you've created a business out of nothing. How magical is that? And then you have these amazing people that believe in you and think you've believe that you've created a successful business, and they want to be a part of it. And so you have this ability to impact their lives for the better, not just in their careers, but their personal lives as well. And so it's about creating that beautiful team environment, typically one that you might not have even experienced in the world of work, but a workplace where, you know, you really need to think about, well, how do I make my direct reports feel safer and accountable and connected and share an exciting future? Now, I know Rose mentioned that I've got a free reflection tool. I've also got a free chapter as well. So if you wanted to download that or get it sent to you and get access to my free leadership tips, just feel free to text me on 0438 986 630, just your first name, last name and email address, and I can send those straight to you. And you can also find me on LinkedIn and my website as well. So happy to answer any questions if you have any, you know, even if you just want to send me an email or message me on LinkedIn. So that's it from me. Thank you so much for your ability to listen today.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Marie-Claire. I loved it. It was absolutely wonderful. It was really enlightening and full of just great information.
Thank you.
So if you were to offer words of wisdom for anyone, what would that be?
Oh, you know what? The biggest thing, coming from personal experience and being a trusted leader myself, or working on it, because I work on it. I don't assume, like that guy I told you about who just assumed everyone trusted him. You have to work on it because that's what my research shows. But it's really about trusting yourself. And
Absolutely.
that can be really, really hard. And if anything, that's the biggest thing I've had to work on. It's just trusting yourself, particularly when you're running your own business and it's your own stuff and you take everything personally. But trusting yourself and what you're doing and how you work is just central to all of
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. You've got to learn to trust yourself. If you can't trust yourself, you can't expect others to trust you. It's just the way things are, and that's what Andrew was saying previously. Is that if you don't have compassion for yourself, you can't expect others to be compassionate towards you. I think and compassion and empathy are two different things. But you got this saying today. It was really great, and now I can't think of it. I should have written it down. But I loved your presentation. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I will look forward to talking to you again really soon.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you, Rose.
Thanks,
Bye.
Marie Claire.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone.